The therapist said, let's try everything to save this marriage. But actually, we had already been working together for 2 months to document my wife's manipulations, and that day everything was going to come out. My name is Jonathan Reed, 43 years old, and until 6 months ago, I believed I had a solid marriage. I work as a financial consultant in Portland, Oregon, and my wife Emma had been a marketing coordinator at a local advertising firm. We'd been married for 11 years, owned a beautiful house in the suburbs, and from the outside, everything looked perfect. The problems started slowly. Emma began staying late at work more frequently, claiming her boss was demanding overtime for a major campaign. She'd come home exhausted, barely speaking to me, and when I'd ask about her day, she'd snap that I wouldn't understand the pressure she was under. Then came the accusations. Small ones at first. She'd claim I was being controlling when I asked why she was working so late. She said I was jealous of her success when her company gave her a promotion. When I suggested we spend more time together, she accused me of being clingy and suffocating. The breaking point came 3 months ago when Emma announced she thought we needed couples therapy. She sat me down in our living room, her face serious, and said our marriage was in trouble. According to her, I was emotionally distant, financially controlling, and increasingly paranoid about her activities. I was stunned. None of this felt true to me, but Emma was convincing. She had examples ready, situations she'd reframed to make me look unreasonable. She talked about how I questioned her expenses, though I'd only asked about a few unusual charges on our credit card. She mentioned how I didn't support her career, though I'd celebrated every promotion and achievement. But what really caught my attention was how prepared she seemed. This wasn't a spontaneous conversation born from frustration. She had talking points, specific incidents catalogued, and solutions ready. She'd already researched therapists and had 3 names picked out. Something felt wrong, but I agreed to try counselling. I loved Emma, or at least I loved who I thought she was, and I wanted to save our marriage. What I didn't know was that Emma had been planning this for months, and therapy wasn't about saving our relationship. It was about building a case against me. Dr. Sarah Mitchell had an impressive office in downtown Portland. Her credentials were displayed prominently on the wall, and she had a warm, professional demeanour that immediately put me at ease. Emma had insisted on choosing the therapist, and I'd agreed, thinking it showed good faith. Our first session was revealing, but not in the way I expected. Emma came prepared with a list of complaints about our marriage. She spoke eloquently about feeling emotionally neglected, financially controlled, and increasingly isolated from friends and family because of my allegedly possessive behaviour. I listened in growing confusion as she described incidents I remembered completely differently. According to Emma, I'd forbidden her from going out with friends, but I recalled encouraging her to maintain her social connections. She claimed I monitored her spending obsessively, but I'd only asked about unusual charges exceeding our agreed-upon budget limits. Dr. Mitchell listened thoughtfully, taking notes and asking clarifying questions. She seemed neutral, professional, and genuinely interested in helping us work through our issues. When she asked for my perspective, I tried to explain my side, but Emma would interrupt with corrections or additional context that made me sound defensive. After the session, I felt frustrated and confused. Was I really the problem in our marriage? Had I been blind to my own behaviour? Emma seemed satisfied with how things had gone, already scheduling our next appointment as we left the office. But something nagged at me during the drive home. Emma's accusations felt too polished, too strategic. She'd presented her case like a lawyer making an argument, not a wife expressing genuine hurt and frustration. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I started keeping a journal, documenting our interactions, conversations, and Emma's behaviour. I wanted to understand what was really happening in our marriage, and if I was truly the problem, I needed to see it clearly. What I discovered over the next few weeks shocked me. Emma was systematically rewriting our shared history, creating conflicts where none had existed, and attributing motivations to my actions that had never crossed my mind. She was building a narrative, and I was the villain in her story. But the real revelation came when I decided to do some research on Dr. Mitchell herself. Dr. Sarah Mitchell wasn't just any therapist. She was my college roommate's younger sister, someone I'd known casually during my university years at Oregon State. Sarah had been just a teenager then, brilliant and determined to pursue psychology. We'd lost touch after graduation, but I remembered her as sharp, ethical, and fiercely loyal to people she cared about. I decided to reach out, ostensibly to catch up, but really to get a sense of whether she remembered me. When I called her office and mentioned my name, her assistant said Dr. Mitchell would call me back personally, which seemed unusual for a busy therapist. Sarah called me that evening. After some small talk about old times and mutual acquaintances, I carefully brought up the fact that my wife and I were seeing a couples therapist. I didn't mention it was her, wanting to see how she'd respond. There was a pause before she said, "Jonathan, I think we need to talk. Can you come to my office tomorrow? Alone?" The next day, I sat across from Sarah in the same chair, where I'd defended myself against Emma's accusations just days before. But this time, the conversation was completely different. "I've been trying to figure out how to handle this situation ethically," Sarah began. "When Emma first contacted me, she didn't mention your full name. I didn't make the connection until our first session together. Once I realized who you were, I was in a difficult position." She explained that professional ethics required her to either refer us to another therapist or continue treating us with full transparency. But something about Emma's presentation had concerned her from the beginning. In my experience, when someone comes to therapy with such a detailed case against their spouse, with specific incidents catalogued and solutions already in mind, it raises red flags, Sarah said. Either they've been thinking about this for a very long time, or they're building a case for something other than reconciliation. Sarah had noticed inconsistencies in Emma's stories, details that changed between sessions, and emotional responses that didn't match the situations she described. As a trained professional, she recognized the signs of manipulation and potential gaslighting. "I've been documenting everything carefully," she told me, "but I needed to understand what was really happening before I could determine the best course of action." We spent the next hour discussing Emma's behaviour, both in therapy and at home. Sarah helped me recognise patterns I'd been missing, manipulation techniques Emma had been using, and the gradual erosion of my confidence and self-trust that had been occurring over months. By the end of our conversation, we'd formed an alliance. Sarah would continue our couples therapy, but she'd also help me document Emma's manipulative behaviour and contradictory statements. We weren't trying to entrap Emma or destroy her, but we needed to protect me from further psychological manipulation and gather evidence of what was really happening in our marriage. Over the next 6 weeks, Sarah and I worked together to carefully document Emma's behaviour and statements. Sarah would ask specific questions during our therapy sessions, designed to elicit responses that would reveal inconsistencies in Emma's narrative. For example, when Emma claimed I had prevented her from visiting her sister in California, Sarah asked for specific details about when this occurred and what exactly I had said. Emma's story kept changing from session to session, first claiming I had forbidden the trip, then saying I had made her feel guilty about the expense, and finally admitting I had actually encouraged her to go. Meanwhile, I was keeping detailed notes at home about our daily interactions. I documented conversations, Emma's mood changes, and instances where she would later describe events completely differently than how they had actually occurred. The pattern became clear. Emma was systematically attempting to rewrite our marriage history to support a narrative where I was controlling, emotionally abusive, and financially manipulative. But she was also becoming increasingly careless with her lies, perhaps because she felt confident that Sarah was on her side. During our 7th session, Emma made a crucial mistake. She claimed that I had threatened her physically during an argument the previous week, something that had absolutely never happened. She described the incident in vivid detail, complete with dialogue and specific actions. The problem was, I had been out of town that entire week on a business trip to Seattle. Something Sarah knew because we had rescheduled our session to accommodate my travel. When Sarah gently pointed out the dates didn't align, Emma quickly tried to backtrack, claiming she had mixed up the timeline. But Sarah pressed further, asking Emma to clarify exactly when this alleged incident had occurred. Emma became flustered, her story changing multiple times within the same session. She finally settled on a different date, but by then, the damage was done. It was clear she had fabricated the entire incident. After that session, Sarah and I met privately again. She had now documented multiple instances of Emma lying about significant events, including false accusations of financial abuse, emotional manipulation, and now physical threats that had never occurred. This goes beyond normal marital problems, Sarah told me. Emma appears to be systematically attempting to build a legal case against you, possibly for divorce proceedings or other legal action. The false accusations of physical threats are particularly concerning. We decided it was time to confront Emma directly, but we would do it strategically. Sarah would reveal during our next session that she had been documenting inconsistencies in Emma's statements and give her an opportunity to explain or recant her false accusations. If Emma continued to lie or escalated her accusations, we would have everything documented by a licensed mental health professional, which would be valuable evidence if legal proceedings became necessary. The confrontation came during what Emma thought would be just another routine therapy session. She arrived confident, having prepared new accusations about my allegedly controlling behavior regarding our joint bank accounts. She had no idea that everything was about to unravel. Sarah began the session differently than usual. Instead of asking about our week or current conflicts, she opened a thick folder containing 8 weeks of documented notes and recordings, all completely legal under Oregon's mental health documentation requirements. Emma, Sarah said calmly, I need to address some significant inconsistencies I've noticed in your statements over our sessions together. As a licensed therapist, I have an ethical obligation to ensure that our work together is based on honest communication. Emma's confident expression began to falter as Sarah methodically went through the documented lies. The story about me preventing her sister's visit, which had changed 3 times. The alleged financial control, which Emma couldn't substantiate with any concrete examples. The claimed emotional abuse that consisted of me asking reasonable questions about unusual expenses. But the moment that broke everything open was when Sarah addressed the false accusation of physical threats. She pulled out her calendar and showed Emma the dates of my business trip, then played back audio recordings from our sessions where Emma had described the alleged incident in detail. Emma, you described Jonathan threatening you physically on March 15th, but he was in Seattle that entire week. You later changed your story to March 22nd, but our session notes show you had told me earlier that you and Jonathan had a wonderful evening together that night, celebrating your work promotion. The colour drained from Emma's face. She looked between Sarah and me, clearly realizing that her carefully constructed narrative was collapsing. For a moment, she tried to maintain her composure, claiming she had simply mixed up dates due to stress. But Sarah wasn't finished. She had documented 17 separate instances where Emma had lied or significantly altered her story between sessions. Each inconsistency was carefully noted, dated, and cross-referenced with verifiable facts. Emma, I need to ask you directly, have you been fabricating incidents to support divorce proceedings or other legal action against Jonathan? The question hung in the air for what felt like an eternity. Emma looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of fury and desperation. Finally, her composure cracked completely. You planned this, she said, her voice rising. You two planned this together to make me look crazy. Sarah remained calm. Emma, I've simply been doing my job as a therapist, which includes maintaining accurate documentation and ensuring that therapy is conducted honestly. The inconsistencies in your statements are concerning, particularly the false accusations of physical threats. Emma stood up abruptly, grabbing her purse. This is ridiculous. Jonathan, you know I would never lie about something like this. Sarah, I think you're biased because of your history with him. But the damage was done. Emma had revealed that she knew about Sarah's and my prior connection, something she should have had no way of knowing, unless she had been researching Sarah's background far more thoroughly than a typical therapy client would. As Emma stormed out of the office, Sarah and I sat in silence for several minutes. Finally she spoke. Jonathan, I recommend you consult with a family law attorney immediately. Based on what I've documented, Emma appears to have been building a case for a contentious divorce, including false accusations that could have serious legal consequences for you. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Thanks to Sarah's meticulous documentation, Emma's credibility was completely destroyed in court. Her false accusations were exposed, and she received far less in the settlement than she had clearly been planning for. I learned that Emma had been having an affair with her boss for over a year, and had been planning her exit strategy carefully, including attempting to paint me as an abusive husband to gain advantage in divorce proceedings. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we know the least, but sometimes old friendships and professional integrity can save you from becoming the victim of someone else's carefully planned deception. The therapy sessions that were supposed to save our marriage ended up saving me instead. 2 years have passed since that final therapy session, and my life has taken directions I never could have imagined. The house Emma and I shared is now home to just me and my German Shepherd, Rex, who turned out to be better company than my ex-wife ever was. Sarah and I maintained a professional relationship throughout the legal proceedings, but once everything was settled, we reconnected as old friends. She helped me understand the psychological patterns I had missed, not just in Emma, but in my own tendency to ignore red flags when someone I loved was manipulating me. Emma remarried her former boss 8 months after our divorce was finalized. I heard through mutual acquaintances that their relationship ended when he discovered she had been having another affair. Some people never change their patterns. I started dating again last year, but with a completely different approach. I pay attention to consistency in words and actions now. I trust my instincts when something feels off, and I learned that real love doesn't require you to doubt your own memory or question your own sanity. The documentation Sarah and I created during those therapy sessions became a template she now uses to help other clients who suspect they're being manipulated by their partners. She told me our case helped her develop better techniques for identifying and documenting psychological manipulation in relationships. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't discovered Sarah's connection to my past. If I'd just accepted Emma's version of reality and continued believing I was the problem in our marriage. The thought still gives me chills. Trust is earned through consistency, not demanded through manipulation. That lesson cost me a marriage, but it probably saved my life.